Hello everybody and welcome to Tiger Tales, a place where you'll find stories and fanfictions written and read to you by your host, me, Tai Tiger. Today we're diving back into the world of Power Rangers Universe 35, a universe where the Super Megaforce Rangers failed to beat the Armada and sadly lost their lives. The Armada took over the planet and in 50 years separated the world into 32 districts. The districts are ruled by several generals, and it's our hero's job to collect the lost Ranger keys and to beat said generals. Our two heroes, Ozzy and Albert. Ozzy was raised in the world of the districts and only knows the districts. He doesn't know what the world was like beforehand, and he's tasked to collect the Ranger keys and become a legendary Ranger. Then we have his partner, Albert, who grew up in the world of the magic realm, so he was safe away from the world of Earth, or what was Earth. Then both our heroes, of course, guided by Jason Lee Scott. Well, more let's say his ghost, as a spirit guide. In the last chapter was part 1 of this two-parter, and our heroes met Mark the Red Cornish Ranger, who ended up appearing what was Stonehenge, and Mark is looking for a bounty hunter by the name of Nephis. So let's dive into the second part, shall we? With Power Rangers Magnificent Megaforce, Chapter 5, An Englishman and an English Key, Part 2. Albert walked through the portal and he appeared outside 3 huge pyramids. Albert knew that before the invasion, this was Egypt. Albert looked up at the sun, the intense heat beaten down on the civilians. Albert clicked his watch and read the information that appeared on the holographic screen. The invasion made it so when all the districts appeared, this became District 9. It was almost the same as before the invasion. It was used as a worshipping ground for the generals. When they took over, they made it so the Egyptians forgot about their gods and ended up worshipping them instead. The tales of the gods were forgotten about in tombs and pyramids and manuscripts. Albert walked into one of the pyramids. Only the first room was accessible. The entrance was a massive hole that got turned into an entranceway by support beams. Albert walked in and looked around. The room had turned its treasures into some form of history museum type of exhibit room, as they were shoved in here for the actual treasure room for now was the generals. Albert walked around till he saw a girl stood there examining something. He knew her, but he did not know how. He walked up to the girl, grabbed her by the shoulder and spun her around. "Excuse me," the girl snapped. "Oh, cut the goody two-shoes act, Nephis," Albert retorted. "How did you know my name?" the girl replied. Her entire personality changed from nerdy and scared to menacing and confident. "I remember you." "Somehow," Albert sighed. Jason then materialized next Albert.
"Is it wise to start a fight with a well-known multiverse bounty hunter?"
Jason asked. "She's the reason why the detectives went off," Albert muttered. "Who are you talking to?" Nephis asked. Doesn't matter. You should leave anyway," Albert barked. "I need something from here, and I ain't leaving till I got it," Nephis sneered. She revealed her morpher and slid the golden piece to the top, clicking it into place, making a crown. Then it flashed, and in a light, she was morphed into the Royal Blue Ranger. Albert held up his hand and his rings started glowing. An energy ring appeared around him, with several Power Rangers weapons floating around. He placed his hand into the ring and pulled out the Jungle Fury shark sabers. He then ran at the Royal Blue Ranger and swung both sabers down, but the Royal Blue Ranger blocked the attack. She spun around and kicked Albert in the stomach, which sent him flying back, flying across the room, crashing into one of the exhibits. Albert climbed to his feet. He wiped the blood from the small cut on his cheek. Then he ran at the Royal Blue Ranger again. He jumped up and spun around, slashing the Ranger in a tornado-like fashion. The Royal Blue Ranger jumped back as Albert landed. She landed quick and ran up to Albert as she kicked him in the leg, then the ribs, then swung her leg up and around, kicking Albert off his feet. "Go get Ozzy," Albert snapped.
"Took you long enough."
Jason sighed, then he phased away. "Are you crazy?" the Royal Blue Ranger chuckled. Maybe I am, Albert sighed as he climbed to his feet. He lunged at the ranger, stabbing at her. She swiftly dodged the attack and grabbed Albert's wrist, and then with a quick pull she disarmed Albert dropping one of the sabers to the ground. Then the ranger kicked Albert in the chest, knocking him back. Just quit now, boy, the Royal Blue Ranger snapped. Never, Albert barked. Albert then held up his ring and the weapon circle reappeared. He threw the saber into the circle and the one on the ground flashed of light and disappeared as well. He then placed his hand back into the circle and pulled out the samurai forest spear. He spun the spear in his hand and dropped into his fighting stance. The Royal Blue Ranger ran at Albert. He spun around and swung the spear, the tip skimming past the ranger's visor. She rolled forward, landing on one knee, and threw a jab into Albert's stomach. He then stabbed the tip of the spear into the ground, the ranger's fist hitting the spear. Albert then kicked the spear forward and the tip of the spear flinging forward, striking the knelt down ranger. Then Albert gripped the spear and rapidly jabbed the ranger and slashed the ranger down the chest. The ranger grabbed the spear and Albert braced himself. Then he lifted the spear up, bringing the Royal Blue Ranger up as well. Albert swung the spear as quickly as he could, throwing the Royal Blue Ranger across the room. She crashed into a glass cabinet. The glass shattered and rained over her as she landed on the floor. The Royal Blue Ranger climbed to her feet, looked down and found a very nice looking dagger. She brushed off the glass, then gripped the dagger and picked it up. She ran at Albert and swung the dagger. Albert dodged the attack and swung his spear. The Royal Blue Ranger ducked and stepped up close, jabbing Albert in the stomach with the handle end of the spear, then swung her foot up, kneeing him in the back. Then she jumped up and landed on top of Albert, the dagger in both hands. She swung it down. Albert crashed to the floor, but managed to hold up the spear with both hands, using it to hold the Royal Blue Ranger back, the tip of the dagger inches away from his chest. Suddenly, Jason materialized next to him.
He's coming now,
Jason barked. What felt like forever. Seconds passed. Then a portal opened and Ozzy and an unknown man walked out. You took long enough, Albert snapped. You must be Nephis, Ozzy blurted.
That is correct,
the man told him. Ozzy ran up to the Royal Blue Ranger, jumped up and double kicked her, knocking her off of Albert. Ozzy jumped up to his feet and held out his hand. Albert reached up and grabbed it and was pulled to his feet. His forest spear disappeared in a sparkle of white light. Thanks for the save, man, Albert sighed. No problem, dude, Ozzy replied. The Royal Blue Ranger demorphed and looked at the man. Really, Mark? You can't just leave me alone, can you? Nephis chuckled.
Don't flatter yourself, Nephis,
Mark retorted. Sorry, Marky Poo, but I've got something to find, Nephis barked. She then pressed her morphle and a portal opened and she darted through it.
That portal wasn't multiversal,
Mark stated. No, she's just hopped into another pyramid. She's looking for something, Albert explained as he looked at his holographic screen projected from his watch, which showed him that Nephis' location was rather close. Albert then stopped and looked at Mark. So, finally find yourself here, huh? Albert asked.
Beg your pardon?
Mark replied. You're Mark, right? The Red Cornish Ranger? Albert stated.
Correct,
Mark replied.
I'm curious on how you knew this,
Jason butted in. Mark looked around the room looking for the voice. You can hear Jason? Albert said curiously.
Yeah, still a little confused on that,
Mark said confused. I'm linked to the spirit of the fallen Jason Lee Scott, Albert told him.
That's kind of cool. Funny enough, my powers are a almost perfect mirror copy of my version of Jason's powers,
Mark explained.
Explain why you can hear me,
Jason sighed. Guys, Royal Blue pain in the ass, looking for something, remember? Ozzy asked. I've been working on that, the pyramid she's in. There's a huge amount of power stored in there. Whatever it is, it must be what she's after, Albert told them.
We have to stop her,
Mark barked.
Easy. We need a game plan,
Jason replied. Jason kinda has a point, Albert sighed. I got a plan, actually. Ozzy grinned, revealing the Royal Britannia English Ranger key. You found a key! Albert cheered. Ozzy nodded and both of the boys' fists bumped each other.
I think I'm good to go,
Mark told them. Good. I've set the portal gun to inside the neighbouring pyramid. We should come pretty much right on top of her. You two are rangers, so you can handle her. I'll find whatever she's looking for and make sure she doesn't get it, Albert commanded.
Understood.
Mark replied.
Be careful, you two.
Jason told Ozzy and Mark. You got it. Ozzy nodded.
I'll look after him.
Mark grinned. Hey, Ozzy started, but before he could argue back, Albert opened the portal and the three of them walked through it and walked into the neighbouring pyramid. It was smaller than the other one, the light was a little more dim, and there was nowhere the sunlight to enter. The air felt thinner, the room felt close. There were several sarcophagi lying in the room, and Nephis was raiding one of them. You two handle her, Albert said. Then he ran off to one of the sarcophagus and started lifting the top of it. Nephis dropped her head, then landed on her feet, turned around to face Mark and Ozzy. Seriously? Nephis sighed.
You can't keep running.
Mark snapped. Yeah, we're here to stop you, Ozzy called out. Whatever, Nephis muttered. Then she slid the golden piece on her morpher, which formed a crown. Then in a flash of light she morphed into the Royal Blue Ranger.
Our turn,
Mark said. Lead the way, dude, Ozzy told him. Mark pulled out his Cornish power morpher and held it out.
It's morphin' time! Kerno bis ficken!
Mark called out, and in a flash of light, Mark was morphed into the red Cornish Ranger. Ozzy flipped open the Super Mega Morpher and held out the Ranger key and flipped open. Time to be magnificent, he called out and slotted the key into the morpher. He turned the key and in a flash of light he was morphed into the red Super Megaforce Ranger. Both Red Rangers dropped their fighting stances. The Royal Blue Ranger ran at the pair of them. She jumped up and split-kicked both of them. As she landed, the Cornish Ranger threw a punch, but the Royal Blue Ranger caught it and kicked him in the chest. As he stumbled back, the Super Mega Force Ranger jumped up and kicked the Royal Blue Ranger. She caught his leg with both hands and swung the Ranger across and around and then threw him into the wall. The Super Mega Force Ranger dropped to the floor. He slowly climbed to his feet, then realised he dropped the English Ranger key. He picked up and it started to glow. Let's try this, shall we? He blurted, then flipped the key up and slotted it into his morpher. He turned the key and was morphed into the Royal Britannia English Ranger. Whoa, now this is cool, the English Ranger called out in surprise. Both the Red Ranger and the Blue Ranger stood there in shock to see the English Ranger stood before them. The Red Cornish Ranger held back his tears as he saw his friend's powers once again. It's fine, it was fun killing him once, I can do it again, the Royal Blue Ranger mocked.
Not this time,
the Red Cornish Ranger barked. Then he summoned Saba and slashed the Blue Ranger. Then the English Ranger summoned the power daggers and ran up to her and hit her with a flurry of slashes. Both Rangers were hit as the Royal Blue Ranger slashed at them. Sparks flew off of everyone as she was thrown off to her feet. Then both of them summoned the power bow and took their shot. Both arrows struck the Royal Blue Ranger. She slowly climbed to her feet again. The Red Cornish Ranger summoned the power sword. The English Ranger summoned the dragon dagger, and both of them attacked the Royal Blue Ranger, not giving her a chance to respond. Whilst they were fighting, Albert shifted a corpse and pulled out a green glowing gem. It was the size of a tennis ball and the shape of a human brain. I think I found it, Albert muttered. The Royal Blue Ranger dropped to her knees and demorphed. Nephis climbed to her feet. She was clearly out of breath.
This is the end, Nephis,
the Red Cornish Ranger barked. Never. You're a fool, Mark, Nephis sneered. Then she looked over to Albert, holding the brain-shaped crystal gem. She bolted for Albert and tackled him to the floor. She snatched the gem out of his hands and placed the dagger she stole earlier against his throat. Move, and I slit him open, and I'll see if he bleeds red, Nephis growled. The Red Cornish Ranger sighed and demorphed. The English Ranger followed suit and demorphed as well.
Fine, you win,
Mark muttered. Good boy, Marky, Nephis grinned. She pressed her morpher and aimed it and opened a portal. Nice to meet you, boys. Sadly it was short, huh? Nephis grinned. Then she bolted through the portal. Mark and Ozzy ran over to Albert and pulled him to his feet. And suddenly a small sphere fell out of the portal, then the portal closed. The silver orb started flashing red. It's a bomb! Albert yelled. Then the orb exploded. Mark, Albert and Ozzy covered their faces, with no time to run, nowhere to run, when suddenly a white light projected from the English Ranger key that was in Ozzy's hand. The light formed into the spirit of the original Royal Britannia English Ranger. Everything stopped moving. The explosion was frozen. Ozzy and Albert were frozen. Everything was frozen in place. The English Ranger walked up to the only person who wasn't frozen. Mark. "Hello, old friend," the Ranger said.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Mark replied, his eyes filled with tears. "Mark, I know you're not of this universe, and you're not my universe's Mark, but I also know that your mission is stop the Royal Blue Ranger," the English Ranger told him.
She killed you all. I have to avenge you.
Mark snapped. "Mark, my old friend, revenge is not a tool in a Ranger's arsenal. That is why you keep failing," the Ranger said.
I understand.
Mark nodded. "You are a strong warrior, Mark. We are always with you. Don't forget that," the English Ranger said. Then he nodded.
Goodbye, old friend.
Mark smiled. Then the English Ranger's spirit burst into a blast of white light. Mark covered his face as the light faded. The trio looked around to see that the pyramid had been totally destroyed from their level up. They looked up to see the great blue sky and the beating hot sun. The top half of the pyramid was completely turned to rubble. Ozzy and the group was now standing on top of the rubble, completely safe from the explosion. "How are we okay?" Ozzy asked, confused.
We had some help.
Mark sighed.
"We have to leave now. The general of this district is going to have this place surrounded within minutes."
Jason barked as he became visible.
I must go. I have to get Nephis.
Mark told them.
"Something's changed."
Jason noted.
I understand now.
Mark said. "It's a shame we just met, but it was nice meeting you," Albert told him. Ozzy sighed, holding the English Ranger key in his hand.
Keep it. It might come in handy. Seems like you guys have your hands full.
Mark grinned. "Thanks. I'll make sure I put it to good use." Ozzy grinned.
If I could stay, I would.
Mark told them. "I have a funny feeling that we'll see each other again," Albert replied.
"If you're anything like the Mark I know, then Nephis is in trouble."
Jason chuckled.
Goodbye, boys.
Mark said, then he opened a portal and walked through it. "Jason has a point. We should scram. These generals are not gonna like us," Albert told Ozzy. "Yeah, I need the sleep anyway," Ozzy sighed. Albert opened the portal and they headed home. Nephis walked through the multiversal tunnel when suddenly the astral projection of her boss appeared in front of her. "You better have good news, Nephis," her boss barked. "I do," Nephis grinned and revealed the brain-shaped green crystal gem. Yes, that is it. I am more than impressed. Now my plan can be put into motion," her boss called out. "How's this paperweight information?" Nephis asked. This gem, thought to be a crystal, resembled to be a human mind, but they are wrong. It is actually a map of that of a god. It was banished to another universe to help people, but it was more of a case of stopping people like me so I couldn't use it, the astral projection told her. "People like you?" Nephis repeated questioningly. "My Earth is torn between gods using the morphing grid in the wrong way. I will use this gem to learn how to brainwash all the gods who don't align themselves with me naturally. Teach them the original way to handle the morphing grid, something forgotten about, then rule Earth once that is done, and then we can go from universe to universe and rule everything." He chuckled. "Count me in," Nephis grinned. "Good. Now come home, Nephis. Come home," the astral projection told her. Then it dematerialized, leaving Nephis alone once more. She stood there with an evil, sinister smile on her face, the brain-shaped gem in her hand. In the place without time and space, William stood there in front of the wild map-themed chessboard. "Almost there," William grinned. "Is this one of your big projects?" Takeshi asked him. "Yes, it is," William said. He then picked up Nef's chess piece and placed it on the chessboard and removed it from Universe 35. He placed it on the global chessboard, on the bad side, the villain side, which is now full of black chess pieces. He placed the new chess piece on the good side. It was white with a blue base. Then he placed the Red Cornish Rangers chess piece next to the new one. Now the good side had 2 white pieces. "You take this way too seriously," Takeshi chuckled. William gave Takeshi a dirty look, then looked at the board. William knew he shouldn't have gotten involved, but he did. He wanted to give Universe 2118 a fighting chance. The universe had only ever had one Power Ranger team, but soon enough it would get a second one, and this new team would change the course of that universe on a global level. And there we have it, guys. We have the Chapter 6 of Magnificent Megaforce. Let's quickly talk about the 2 voice actors. First, Mark is, of course, playing Mark the Red Cornish Ranger, a character he designed. You can go find out the origins of the Red Cornish Ranger by listening to Power Rangers Royal Britannia, which is where I got the English Ranger key from, on Nerds Through Comics, a podcast run by Mark himself, where he adapts comic books into audio dramas, such as the Darth Vader comics, the Star Trek Doctor Who crossover, and Power Rangers comics. And of course he's uploading his original story, Power Rangers Royal Britannia. Then we have the voice of Jason's Ghost, which is played by my Parabatai Willie, aka Cosplay Dude 637. He's got 2 podcasts. One, Power Rangers Universe 19, where he's built his own Power Rangers universe with Ultra Rangers, Power Rangers Cyberforce, Power Rangers Skyforce, and he's also adapting some of the Kamen Rider stories into his own adaptations, with, of course, my help, because I also have a story placed in Universe 19. Then we have Storytime with Cosplay Dude 637, which is his other stories, anything non-Power Rangers and Kamen Rider related. We have stories like Shadow Hunters, Sword Art Online, and his original story, aka The Order. So make sure you go follow these 2. We are the 3 Ranger Bros, and we have a lot of content for you guys to listen to, and more coming. We're in association with Zero to Hero. Zero to Hero is a podcast where the Balkan Scholar Podcasting, aka Billy and Jim, talk about all sorts of fandoms, and they interview people of said fandoms. They are mostly big fans of Power Rangers, but they delve into other stuff as well, and all 3 of the Ranger Bros have been interviewed at some point or another, so you guys should check them out as well. With that being said, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for listening, and I shall see you guys very soon.